Hashem commanded Moshe to warn Pharaoh about the 8th plague that he would bring upon the Egyptians. Say to Pharaoh, "Doesn't someone who invites a guest usually exert himself to assist him in every possible way? Yet after you invited the Jews as guests to your country, you coaxed them into serving you and finally made them your slaves and oppressed them bitterly. I swear that you will taste that self-same bitterness for having so shamefully changed your conduct towards the children of Israel." Moshe and Aharon transmitted Hashem's message to Pharaoh. They warned him, "Thus says Hashem, God of the Hebrews, if you still refuse to let my people go, I will bring locusts into your boundaries tomorrow. They shall devour the wheat and spelt that were spared by the hail. The locusts will fill your houses, the houses of your servants, and all of Egypt. It will be a plague the like of which was never experienced by your fathers and fathers' fathers." Moshe delivered the message and noticed that Pharaoh's servants threw glances at each other. Apparently, they believed his words this time. He withdrew for a while to give them the opportunity to discuss the matter among themselves and do teshuvah. "Be sensible," the servants advised Pharaoh. "How long must this man continue to be a menace to us? If the plague of locusts strikes us, we are bound to die from hunger. Set all the Jews free that they may worship their God. Don't you realize that Egypt is lost?" Pharaoh dispatched a messenger to bring Moshe and Aharon back to the palace. He said to them, "Go serve your God. Who are the people who will go?" Moshe answered, "We will go with our young and with our old, with our sons and with our daughters, with our sheep and with our cattle. Just as all of us served you, so shall we all serve Hashem." "Only men offer sacrifices," objected Pharaoh. "For what purpose do you need the children? You must be planning to escape, and I cannot listen to you. Do not think that your plan to take the Jews to the wilderness will succeed. I am an expert astrologer, and I see the star Ra hovering above the Jewish people in the desert. That star spells blood. You will all perish miserably in the wilderness." When the children of Israel heard Pharaoh's ominous words, they trembled. In fact, Pharaoh was correct in predicting that the star Ra symbolized blood for the Jewish people. But he did not know that Hashem would convert the blood of death to the blood of bris milah by commanding children of Israel to circumcise themselves upon entering Eretz Yisrael. Pharaoh foresaw what the fate of community of Israel would be according to the laws of astrology, which are the laws of nature. In truth, Hashem elevated the destiny of community of Israel above the stars and led them through the desert with miracles. Pharaoh gave orders to drive Moshe and Aharon out of the palace. Hashem then told Moshe to stretch out his hand. Immediately, a mighty east wind began to blow. It continued blowing the entire day and night. At the end of the night, it brought swarms of locusts upon Egypt. Hashem delayed the plague until the end of the night in the hope that the Egyptians might still change their minds. The sight of clouds of locusts descending upon Egypt did not sadden the Egyptians, but, on the contrary, cheered them. "These locusts will make delectable meals of locust preserves," they rejoiced. "We will put them into barrels, salt them, and eat them." The reason they were so happy was that they were bordering on starvation. The pestilence had exterminated their animals so that no meat could be obtained, and the plague of hail had destroyed all fruit and vegetable supplies. These locusts were not ordinary insects. They were an army of wonder insects, miraculously equipped with special organs to wound and kill the Egyptians. They possessed teeth like iron, horns resembling those of oxen, claws like lions, wings like eagles, and writhing backs like snakes. They sprang into the faces of the Egyptians and bored their eyes out with their claws. Their saliva was deadly poison. Whenever it dripped upon an Egyptian, he immediately died. The locusts were literally insatiable. They not only consumed the dew, trees, and grass, but even hopped into the Egyptians' houses and devoured their jewelry, clothes, and precious articles. There were so many of them that they darkened the sky, covered the surface of the earth, and stopped up all the wells. They ate up everything in Egypt, so that by the end of the plague, there were neither grass nor leaves left in the land. Why were the Egyptians afflicted with this plague? Hashem was punishing them midah keneged midah for having forced the children of Israel to sow their crops. Now the locusts devoured whatever the children of Israel had sown. Furthermore, after the plague of hail, The Egyptians believed that they would benefit from the fruits that fell to the ground when the hailstones shattered the trees. Hashem therefore sent the locusts to consume anything edible that had been thrown to the ground by the hail. Pharaoh hurriedly called Moshe and Aharon, confessing, "I sinned against Hashem your God and against you. Forgive me only this one time, and entreat Hashem that he may relieve me from the locusts which bring upon us death by starvation." When Moshe prayed, Hashem brought a strong west wind. With a single gust it carried all the locusts away and cast them into the Yam Suf. Even those locusts which the Egyptians had managed to collect and pickle in barrels vanished along with the others. But once the plague ended, Hashem allowed Pharaoh's heart to harden, and he refused to let the children of Israel go. Hashem commanded Moshe, "Stretch out your hand towards heaven and bring darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness thick that it can be felt." When Moshe stretched out his hand, darkness enveloped the land of Egypt, remaining for 6 continuous days. This plague lasted only 6 days and not 7 like the previous one, since the 7th day of darkness was reserved for when the Egyptians would pursue the children of Israel at the Yam Suf, and Hashem would bring darkness upon them. On the Yadait, first 3 days, the Egyptians were able to move around freely in the dark. However, no matter how many candles or torches they lit, the darkness prevailed and they could not see a thing. During these days, the Rishaim among the Jews died. They were those who did not believe in the redemption, and those who acquired riches, or held high positions in Egypt and did not want to leave. Said Hashem, "If I will smite them in public, the Egyptians will scoff. The Jews are stricken by plague just as we are." Hashem therefore brought the first 3 days of darkness, so that the children of Israel should be able to bury their dead unobserved by their enemies. On the 4th day, the darkness thickened into a compact mass. As soon as this happened, the Egyptians were no longer able to move. One who was standing had to remain in that position for the next 3 days, unable to sit down, and one who was sitting could no longer get up. While the Egyptians were thus immobile in the dense darkness, they heard the doors of their houses open and footsteps approaching. There were the sounds of cabinet drawers and doors being opened, but they were unable to arise and find out who the intruders were and to expel them. In fact, these secret visitors were the children of Israel. They had been informed by Moshe that upon leaving Egypt, they should ask their neighbors for gold and silver. They therefore went now to ascertain what precious items the Egyptians had, so as to be able to tell them later, "Give me the article which you keep in this drawer." Not a single Jew, however, took even the smallest item that was not his during the period of darkness. The children of Israel were able to see even in the midst of the darkness, since every Jew was accompanied by a burst of light wherever he went. Strange as it may seem, the Egyptians had one clear vision, in spite of the darkness they perceived. What was happening in the land of Goshen? They watched pictures of the children of Israel, projected as if by a camera, sitting around tables, eating, drinking, and rejoicing. That sight filled them with profound unhappiness. Why were the Egyptians plunged into darkness while the children of Israel enjoyed light? The Egyptians were being punished, midah keneged midah, for one of their sadistic amusements. An Egyptian would order a Jew, "Hold this burning candle on your head while I eat supper, but hold it straight. One move and your head will be split with this sword." And the poor trembling Jew had to stand motionless with a candle on his head while the Egyptian enjoyed his meal. Now Hashem reversed their roles, causing the Egyptians to remain motionless and morose while the children of Israel enjoyed themselves. The darkness, in addition, was symbolic of the fact that the Egyptians had chosen a life of spiritual darkness, while the children of Israel had accepted upon themselves Hashem's Torah and mitzvos, which are compared to light. They therefore merited actual light. Pharaoh summoned Moshe and Aharon and cried, "Go, serve Hashem. You may take your little children with you also, but leave us your animals behind as a security that you will return." "No," answered Moshe. "We will take all our animals too, including those which are the joint property of a Jew and an Egyptian. Moreover, you will give us of your own animals, for we do not yet know how many sacrifices Hashem will require from us for his service." Pharaoh realized from Moshe's reply that Moshe obeyed only Hashem and did not heed his pronouncements, although Pharaoh claimed to be master of the universe. He shouted angrily, "Go away from here. and beware of appearing before me again. For on the day you return to see my face, you shall die." "Well spoken," answered Moshe. "I will indeed not return here to see you. Hashem told me that I will never again come to see you, but instead you will come to see me." The warning about the 10th plague. Since Moshe had announced to Pharaoh that he would never again return to him, Hashem appeared to Moshe before he left Pharaoh's palace and instructed him to warn Pharaoh about the last plague. This was the only time that Hashem revealed himself to Moshe in Pharaoh's palace, which was full of idols. It happened only in honor of Moshe, in order to fulfill his promise that he would not return to see Pharaoh again. "I will bring one more plague upon Pharaoh," Hashem foretold to Moshe, "which will be as destructive as all the other plagues put together. After this plague, he will not only allow you to leave, but he will actually drive you from his country." Hashem described to Moshe the future plague wherein he would slay the firstborn, and Moshe relayed his words to Pharaoh. "Thus says Hashem, about midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt, and I will smite every Egyptian firstborn, from the crown prince destined to become Pharaoh's successor, down to the lowliest of the Egyptians, the firstborn of the maid, behind the millstones, and even the firstborn of the animals. The resulting screaming and weeping will be more intense than anything that was ever heard before, or anything that will ever be heard in the future. Then all your ministers will come to me." Moshe pointed at the ministers who stood next to Pharaoh. "This general here next to you, this duke and all your nobles. They will all bow to me and beg us to leave." Although Moshe knew that even Pharaoh himself would bow to him, he refrained from stating so directly, since Hashem had commanded him to be respectful towards the Egyptian king. "This plague does not sound too bad," Pharaoh jested. "How many firstborn are there in Egypt altogether? Maybe several hundred?" But Pharaoh erred. He did not realize that the Egyptian women, who were steeped in immorality, had a number of firstborn, fathered by different men, and each man possessed several firstborn sons from different women. An old Egyptian woman came out to mock Moshe, saying, "How can the outcry after this plague be as terrible as you predicted? Take me, for example. I no longer have a father or a mother who could be slain. My brothers and sisters passed away already, and my only son is dead. I will not be affected by this plague in any way. You are a false prophet. You will cry out before everyone else," Moshe prophesied. The first mitzvah commanded to the children of Israel, Kiddush HaChodesh, sanctification of the new moon. On the 1st of Nisan, Hashem instructed Moshe and Aharon, "You will be redeemed in the month of Nisan. Count this month therefore as the first of all the months in the Jewish calendar." The birth of the prince was celebrated by the whole country with fireworks and flags. The happy day was designated an annual national holiday. After the prince grew up, he traveled to foreign countries and one day was taken captive by an enemy. He was held prisoner for many years but was finally released. The day of his return was a happy event, not only for his parents, but for the entire population, who shared in the king's joy. The king proclaimed that the day of the prince's liberation should be celebrated as a national holiday in the future instead of his birthday. Similarly, the Torah counts Nisan as the first month rather than Tishri, even though the birthday of the world was in Tishri. However, a new period in history began with the redemption from Egypt, and since then, Nisan deserved to become the first of the months. Hashem informed Moshe, "For 2,448 years, I have proclaimed every new month in Mao, heaven. But now that you have become a nation, I entrust you with this task." The king carefully guarded the keys to his treasury, allowing no one to touch them. But as soon as his son came of age, he handed all the keys over to him, saying, "In the future, you will be responsible for them." Similarly, from the time of creation until Yetzias Mitzrayim, Hashem himself fixed the beginning of every new month. His first act when the children of Israel became a nation, however, was to put them in charge of designating the beginning of the new month. Hashem explained to Moshe and Aharon that the Beis Din would be in charge of determining the beginning of a new month based upon the report of 2 witnesses who had observed the appearance of a new moon. If the judges accepted their testimony, they would declare that a new month had begun. Moshe could not visualize clearly how the moon had to appear in order to be termed a new moon. and asked Hashem for an explanation. "I will demonstrate the entire procedure to you," answered Hashem. Hashem wrapped himself, as it were, in a talit, placed Moshe on one side and Aharon on the other, and called the angels Michael and Gabriel as witnesses. "In which position did you see the moon?" Hashem questioned the angels. "In front of the sun or behind it? To the north or south of it? How high was it?" In this manner, Hashem taught Moshe and Aharon, should the Bais Din question the witnesses in order to proclaim a new month. As soon as the Bais Din on earth has made its decision, declaring, for example, "Today is Rosh Hashanah," I will comply with its decision. I will set up my heavenly tribunal to judge the world on that day. Should the Bais Din revoke its decision and postpone Rosh Hashanah by another day, I will tell the defending and accusing angels and the angels who act as witnesses on the day of judgment to leave. I will set up the heavenly tribunal once again on the following day, proclaiming it to be Rosh Hashanah. At first, Bais Din used to accept the testimony of any Jew, but when the Baitusim, a sect of students of Tzadok and Baitus who denied the oral tradition, attempted to mislead the Bais Din, only a Jew who was faithful to the teachings of the sages was admitted as a witness. The fraud of the Baitusim was brought to the attention of the sages in the following way. The Baitusim would hire 2 false witnesses, both of whom testified that they had seen the new moon. Once, a loyal Jew offered to serve as a witness in order to play a trick on them. After the first witness had given his testimony, the man was called in and questioned by the judges. "In which position did you see the moon?" The man answered mockingly, "I ascended the slope of Ma'alai Adumim and saw the moon between 2 rocks. It had the shape of a calf, ears resembling those of a lamb, antlers like those of a deer, and a tail in the back, and if you don't believe me, you will find 200 zuz under my mattress given to me for the purpose of telling you all this." "Why did you agree to be hired as a false witness?" the judge asked him. "I heard that the Baitusim intended to deceive the Bais Din. I therefore agreed to their proposition in order to reveal their plot to you, for if not, they might have employed a worse witness to deceive you." The Bais Din told him, "The money, which the Baitusim gave you is yours as a gift, and those who hired you will be whipped." Malkos. Bais Din has the power to confiscate money and declare it hefker. The judges were therefore able to transfer the money to this man for revealing the plans of the Baitusim. Hashem commands to offer a Pesach sacrifice and to observe Pesach in all generations. On that first of Nisan, Hashem gave Moshe and Aharon additional mitzvos. "Tell the children of Israel today," Hashem commanded, "that on the 10th of Nisan, the head of each family shall take a lamb. It must be male without blemish and in its first year. He shall tie it to his bedpost for 4 days to examine it and determine that it is without blemish and fit for a korban. In the afternoon of the 14th of Nisan, a representative of the household must slaughter the lamb for a korban Pesach." "Master of the universe," objected Moshe, "how can I command the children of Israel to slaughter sheep which are idolized by the Egyptians?" Hashem answered, "I swear that they will not leave this land unless they first slaughter the gods of Egypt," demonstrating the helplessness of the deities of the nations. By offering as sacrifices the gods of Egypt which the children of Israel used to worship, they would find atonement for their sins of idol worship in Egypt. Furthermore, seeing the idols of Egypt tied to their bedposts and bleeding helplessly, while the Egyptians were powerless to take action against them, would strengthen their emunah in Hashem. Hashem gave Moshe and Aharon detailed instructions about the mitzvah of the korban Pesach, commanding, "After slaughtering the lamb, you should let its blood flow into a basin, dip a bundle of hyssop grass into it, and place some of the blood on the doorposts and lintel of the house in which the korban Pesach will be eaten." Why did Hashem command that they dip the hyssop into blood? The hyssop is the lowliest of grasses. Hashem was hinting to the children of Israel, "Although the Egyptians consider you lowly like the hyssop, in my eyes you are precious." Why did the blood have to be placed on the lintels and doorposts? The lintel, which is higher than the doorposts, represented Abraham, and the 2 doorposts, Yitzchak and Yaakov, demonstrating that the children of Israel would be saved from the plague which destroyed the firstborn in the merit of their forefathers, since their own merits were insufficient. Our forefathers are represented by doorposts to imply that just as the doorpost is never detached from the door, so did our forefathers never budge from Hashem. Hashem commanded, "The meat of the lamb shall be eaten on the night of the 15th of Nisan. It must be roasted whole over a fire and consumed together with matzos and maror, bitter herbs. All of it must be eaten before daybreak, and if any part of the sacrifice is left over, it must be burned on the morning of the second day, meaning the day after Yom Tov. You shall eat it in a hurry after completing your meal, your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your stick in hand all prepared for immediate departure from Egypt. All foods consumed on the night of Pesach are reminiscent of our forefathers. The lamb is roasted over a fire, reminding of Abraham who was saved from the burning furnace. The matzos allude to Sarah who baked matzos for her guests, the three angels. The maror brings to mind Yaakov who was persecuted by his brother Esav, and whose life consisted of a succession of tribulations. Furthermore, the bitter maror symbolizes the Egyptian exile, during which the Egyptians embittered the lives of the Jews, Shemos 1:14. Why did Hashem command that the lamb for the Korban Pesach be roasted rather than cooked, and why did it have to be prepared whole? There is a common reason for the above commandments. Hashem wished to establish publicly, beyond all doubt, that it was the lamb the object of Egyptian reverence and not any other kind of animal that was being slaughtered here. He therefore commanded that it not be cooked since the cooking process may take place in a covered pot, whereas roasting is a procedure performed over an open fire. In addition, a food that is roasted emits a much stronger odor than a cooked dish. Further, it was to be roasted whole to make it evident to any onlooker that it was a sheep. Moreover, the lamb was to be roasted in fire, symbolic of the Torah law which decrees that idols must be burnt. The lamb was to be consumed only after a satisfying meal and not to be devoured hungrily, in order to express contempt for the Egyptian idol. Hashem explained to Moshe and Aharon that the name of this sacrifice was to be Korban Pesach, signifying that Hashem would leap over, Pesach means to pass over, the houses of children of Israel upon seeing the blood on their doorposts and lintels, and he would spare their firstborn from being smitten when the Egyptian firstborn would die. The king sent the following message to his sons. Tomorrow the Supreme Court will hold a session to mete out capital punishment to all traitors to the crown. I know that you had dealings with those traitors also. I therefore advise you to appear during the court session tomorrow and present me with a gift. The jury will then clearly realize that you are supporters of the crown and will not dare to include you in the sentence of the criminals. Similarly, Hashem commanded children of Israel to offer a Korban Pesach and place its blood on the doorposts and lintels at the time when the Egyptians were being punished. Hashem did not need this sign to distinguish between the homes of the Egyptians and those of the Jews. Rather, the blood served as a demonstration that the Jews were publicly repudiating the Egyptian idol worship and belonged to the followers of Hashem. By fulfilling this commandment, children of Israel showed that they were worthy of being saved. In addition to the laws of the Korban Pesach, Hashem ordained that the 15th of Nisan be observed annually in every generation as the Yom Tov of Pesach. The children of Israel would have to remove all chametz, leavened dough, from their dwelling places on the 14th of Nisan and keep their houses free of chametz for 7 consecutive days. They were commanded to consume the Korban Pesach each year together with matzos and maror on the night of the 15th of Nisan, in eternal memory of their deliverance from Egypt. The children of Israel circumcise themselves and offer the Korban Pesach. Moshe related to the children of Israel the divine commandments concerning the Korban Pesach. He concluded by announcing, "When you enter Eretz Yisrael and your children question you about the meaning of the lamb offered on the 14th of Nisan, say, 'It is a Pesach sacrifice to Hashem, who passed over our houses in Egypt and delivered us.'" Upon hearing Moshe's words, the children of Israel bowed their heads and prostrated themselves in thanks to Hashem, since they understood the import of Moshe's message. They would soon be redeemed. They would enter Eretz Yisrael, and they would be given offspring. As Hashem had commanded, The head of each Jewish family tied a lamb to his bedpost on the 10th of Nisan. When the Egyptians saw their gods being prepared as a sacrifice, they wept, for the sight of their gods' honor being slighted was harder to bear than all the plagues. However, they did not dare to harm the Jews. The day these events took place was a Shabbat. In memory of that great day, it was established that Shabbat when the children of Israel openly dragged the gods of the Egyptians to their houses to prepare them for slaughter, and the Egyptians did not protest. We call the Shabbat before Pesach, Shabbat Hagadol, the Great Shabbat. On the 14th of Nisan, Hashem explained to Moshe and Aharon the conditions that must be fulfilled by someone who wants to partake of the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach may not be consumed by someone who estranged himself from Hashem, be he a Jew who rejected the Torah or a Gentile. It may not be eaten by a Ger Toshav, a Gentile who lives in Eretz Yisrael and observes the 7 Noachide laws, or by a non-Jew who was hired to work for a Jew. It may not be eaten by anyone who is uncircumcised. When the king made a banquet, in his own honor he instructed his servants, "Admit to the palace only those who wear my special badge." Similarly, Moshe told the children of Israel, "Only one who bears the seal of the covenant with Abraham, the Bris Milah, may taste of the Korban Pesach." The Bris Milah is the sign which indicates that we are Hashem's servants. There was a Gentile who used to travel to Yerushalayim and partake of the Korban Pesach, pretending that he was a Jew. Once, this Gentile came to the town of Netzavin in Babel and boasted before Ar, Yehuda ben Besaira, "Your Torah states that no stranger or uncircumcised person may eat of the Korban Pesach, yet I receive the choicest part of the Korban every year in Yerushalayim." Ar. Yehuda ben Besaira had no legal power to punish the man in Bavel, and he therefore questioned, "Were you ever given the tail of the lamb?" "Never," admitted the Gentile. "You see, you were deprived of the most savory portion," commented Ar Yehuda. "That part the Jews keep for themselves. Next time you are in Yerushalayim, ask for the tail." When the Gentile traveled to Yerushalayim on the following Pesach and, as usual, was handed a portion of the Korban Pesach, he exclaimed, "I do not want this portion, I want the tail." "Impossible," answered the one in charge of distributing the meat. "How could we do such a thing?" "Ar Yehuda ben Besaira told me that you withheld from me the choicest part. I pay as much as you do." All the Jews who heard his request were perplexed. Everyone who studies Torah knows that the tail may not be consumed but is offered up to the Almighty on the Mizbeach, Vayikra 3:9. Since his strange statement aroused suspicion, they inquired about his identity and soon discovered that he was a Gentile. As a consequence, the Beis Din executed him. Thus, the culprit was convicted through Ar Yehuda ben Besaira's ingenious plan. The Beis Din sent him a message saying, "Peace unto you, Yehuda ben Besaira, who lives in Netzavin and whose net is spread out as far as Yerushalayim." The Roman Emperor Antonius asked his friend Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, "Will I receive a portion of the Livyasan in the world to come?" His question meant, "Will the righteous among the nations receive a portion in Olam Haba?" Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi answered in the positive. "How is this possible?" Antonius questioned him. "I know that I am not allowed to partake of your yearly Korban Pesach. If so, why will I be permitted to partake of the flesh of the Livyasan, which is certainly holier?" "Regarding the Korban Pesach, I cannot do anything for you," replied Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. "Even the greatest tzaddik may not partake of it as long as he is uncircumcised, for the Torah states explicitly that only someone with Bris Milah may share in it." When Antonius thus became aware of the greatness of the mitzvah of Milah, he circumcised himself and became a ger. He will be at the head of all Gairai Tzedek, who will be rewarded in the future. Hashem commanded Moshe and Aharon that prior to slaughtering the Korban Pesach, a company was required to join with the intention of eating it together. No outsider would be allowed to join the group once the lamb had been slaughtered. Not one bone of the Korban Pesach was allowed to be broken. After consuming the Korban, the children of Israel had to cast the bones intact into the marketplaces in full view of all the Egyptians. When Moshe commanded the children of Israel, to circumcise themselves in order to be able to partake of the Korban Pesach, many hesitated. Hashem therefore told Moshe to roast his own Korban Pesach immediately. The Almighty then summoned the winds of Gan Eden to cling to that Korban, causing its aroma to dissipate throughout Egypt. Its sweet odor was so overwhelming that the children of Israel streamed to Moshe, begging him, "Please let us eat of your Korban Pesach." But Hashem commanded Moshe and Aharon to allow only circumcised people to partake of it. All children of Israel, without exception, immediately agreed to the Bris Milah. They were circumcised by Moshe and Yehoshua. A vast number of Egyptians, known as Erev Rav, who wished to join the children of Israel also performed Bris Milah and became Gairim in order to partake of the Korban Pesach. Now the children of Israel possessed two mitzvos, in whose merit they were worthy of the redemption, the blood of the Korban Pesach and the blood of their Bris Milah, both of which attested to their allegiance to Hashem. At midnight on the 15th of Nisan, Hashem passed over the Jewish homes. He kissed each one of children of Israel, as it were, blessing him for having offered the Korban Pesach and performed Bris Milah. The phrase that children of Israel were kissed by the Almighty denotes that through Bris Milah, they achieved a higher level of Kedusha and proximity to the Shekhinah. When the Egyptian firstborn heard Moshe's warning about a plague in which they would all perish, they implored their fathers, "Please release the Jews. In the past, everything that Moshe predicted has come about, and we do not wish to die." The Egyptian fathers refused to listen to them, answering, "Each man possesses 10 sons. It is better that each family sacrifice one of its sons than to let the Jews go free." Seeing that their fathers were merciless, the firstborn sons decided to appeal to Pharaoh. They reasoned, "Pharaoh will certainly acquiesce because he is a firstborn himself." They pleaded with Pharaoh, "Grant the Jews liberty. Why should all of us be annihilated and you too? Expel these men from the palace." Pharaoh angrily instructed his servants, "We must all be prepared to sacrifice our lives to prevent the Jews from leaving." The firstborn returned home, but before midnight they wreaked havoc in the land by drawing their swords and, in blind rage, slaying their fathers and whomever crossed their paths. They took all types of precautions in the hope of being saved from the plague. Some were hidden by their parents in the temples of idol worship, which they thought to be safe. Other firstborn children ran to the land of Goshen to sleep in the same beds as children of Israel. At the exact moment when midnight struck, Hashem's words came true. The Almighty descended upon Egypt, accompanied by a host of destroying angels. Hashem himself slew the firstborn, while the angels of destruction were assigned the task of slaying the as-yet unborn firstborn still in their mothers' wombs. All firstborn children died, both male and female, from Pharaoh's noble sons down to the enslaved firstborn of the Egyptian prisoners who had maliciously stated, "We would rather stay in jail for the rest of our lives than see the Jews go free." Hashem also slew the firstborn of all the animals because the Egyptians worshipped them. The Egyptian firstborn who were hiding in the temples of idol worship were smitten together with their gods, which all disintegrated the wooden idols. Rotted, the stone idols dissolved, and the gold and silver images melted. Not a single idol remained intact except for the idol Baal Tzfon, which continued to exist in order to grant the Egyptians the choice of attributing supremacy to it. In households in which there were no firstborn children, the oldest in the house was slain. In homes where the firstborn had passed away before the plague, the dogs dragged their corpses out of the graves, chewed them, and also demolished the statues erected in their honor. The old woman who had derided Moshe's prophecy was the first one to be stricken. She possessed a statue of her firstborn son which she cherished more than her life. The dogs pulled it out and demolished it, and she was heartbroken. All the Egyptians were more affected by seeing their statues destroyed than by the actual death of their firstborn. Furthermore, the sight of their idols tumbling down and disintegrating in front of their eyes evoked in them the greatest sorrow. Pharaoh's palace was the scene of disaster. Almost all of his sons were dead, and so were his servants' sons. Pharaoh, mad with rage, seized a sword and executed all the counselors and noblemen who had advised him to disobey Moshe. This was the third massacre of Reshaim on that terrible night of punishment. The firstborn had slain their fathers and whomever else they encountered. Hashem smote the firstborn at midnight. Pharaoh killed all his nobles and advisors. Following the plague, a mob of Egyptians stormed the palace intending to murder the king in revenge, and he had to hide. But Pharaoh escaped, for Hashem kept him alive so that he could bear witness to all his miracles. Why did the plague of slaying the firstborn take place at night rather than by day? Hashem was thus punishing the Egyptians middah keneget middah for having reversed the natural order of things. They had ordered the children of Israel to perform labor, which is usually done by day at night and vice versa, and had also commanded the Jewish men to perform work ordinarily done by women, while to the women they assigned the jobs of men. Consequently, Hashem also reversed the natural order and punished them in the middle of the night. The Egyptians deserved to have their firstborn slain as a punishment for having attempted to annihilate the children of Israel, who are called Hashem's firstborn son, Shemos 4:2. Hashem, however, waited until the very end before he visited this severe plague upon the Egyptians. He hoped they would do teshuvah as soon as they were made to suffer, and their animals and belongings were struck, and thus the plague that was a threat to their lives could be avoided. The order which Hashem employed in bringing the plagues resembled the tactics of a king who wants to wage war to subdue an enemy country. Blood. In subduing an enemy country, the invader's first action is to cut off the country's water supplies. Thus Hashem converted the water of the Egyptians into an undrinkable liquid. Frogs. Thereafter, the attacker frightens the enemy by means of drummers, trumpet blowers, and the clatter of horses and wagons. Similarly, Hashem brought the frogs whose croaking terrorized the Egyptians. Lice. Next, the invader brings archers who shoot a host of bows and arrows against the enemy. In a similar way, Hashem brought lice, which attacked the Egyptians like arrows. Wild beasts. The attacker then calls foreign allies to join him. Thus Hashem summoned all kinds of destructive beasts from the wilderness to gather against the Egyptians. Pestilence. As the attacker nears the rival camp, he sends riders in front of him to annihilate the enemy's animals. This was accomplished by the pestilence. Boils. Coming even closer to the enemy's camp, the conqueror seeks to destroy the opposing army. Thus Hashem inflicted their bodies with boils. Hailstones. He hurls missiles to demolish the city walls. Locusts. Subsequently, he assembles his army to conquer the city. Thus the locusts finished off whatever was left by the hail. Darkness. Once he has taken possession of the city, he takes the enemies captive and imprisons them. Slaying of the firstborn. Finally, he executes the leaders and generals of the enemy camp. Hashem brought 10 plagues upon the Egyptians to punish Pharaoh, who denied the existence of the creator of the universe, had been brought into existence by 10 pronouncements. The children of Israel, moreover, merited that their enemies should be afflicted with 10 plagues, because their forefather Abraham had successfully withstood 10 trials. The plagues emerged from all the various elements, some from the water, some from the earth, and some from the sky, to manifest that Hashem is the master over them all. Pharaoh thought, Moshe has never lied yet, and he declared that he would never return to me. I must therefore go to him. He left his palace in the dark of night and hurried to the land of Goshen. Arriving there, he inquired, "Where is the home of Moshe and Aharon?" The Jewish boys recognized the king of Egypt and shouted mockingly, "Moshe's house is here." "No, in the next street," jested another. Pharaoh was lost and wandered through the streets until he finally found the right house. He knocked. "Who is there?" Moshe called. "The wretched, humiliated King Pharaoh," a trembling voice answered from outside. "Why have you come here? Kings don't usually knock at doors in the middle of the night. I must speak to you. Please come outside." Moshe and Aharon, like all the Jews, were eating the Korban Pesach and saying Hallel to Hashem. "I cannot come outside," answered Moshe, "because Hashem forbade us to leave our houses until morning." "Moshe, my dear friend, just listen to me through the window," begged Pharaoh. Moshe leaned out of the window, and Pharaoh fell down before him, imploring him, I beg of you, leave the country immediately and take everyone with you. Hashem told us to remain in our houses until morning, repeated Moshe. Are we burglars who sneak away during the night? I prefer that you leave immediately. I will give you as many of my animals and servants as you wish. Pharaoh persisted. Why the sudden hurry? Asked Moshe. I am a firstborn myself, admitted Pharaoh, and I fear that I will yet die if you remain here any longer. Do not be afraid. Hashem will sustain you so that you may witness still more of his punishments. Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh, had come along with her father to find Moshe. She reproached Moshe. Is this your gratitude for having been raised by me? Why have you brought so much sorrow upon my father's house? Have any of the plagues harmed you? Moshe asked her. No, admitted Batya. Not one of them touched me. Since you are a firstborn daughter, you should also have died in the plague of slaying of the firstborn, said Moshe. But you were saved on account of my tefillah. But how can I bear to see my father's family suffer? She asked. They are being punished for not obeying Hashem, was Moshe's reply. Pharaoh questioned, what can I do to end this plague? Very simple, Moshe replied. Call out as loudly as you can that the children of Israel are free. Pharaoh raised his voice and announced, listen to me, Jewish people. You are free to leave. Until now, you were Pharaoh's servants. From now on, you are Hashem's. A miracle happened, and Pharaoh's voice was magnified so that the message of freedom resounded throughout Egypt. But Pharaoh was still not content. He walked from house to house, telling every Jew individually, goodbye, leave in peace. It was the morning of the 15th of Nisan, 2448. The land of Egypt was full of the dead and expiring. Not all firstborn had died immediately. Hashem meted out individual judgment to each firstborn. Some perished immediately, others remained writhing in agony until morning, and still others suffered from the plague for 3 days and only then expired. There was not a single Egyptian house in which there were not 5 or 10 deceased, for besides the firstborn, Hashem smote those vicious Egyptians who opposed the redemption of the children of Israel. Nevertheless, the Egyptians did not remain with their dead. Instead, they all hurried to Goshen with animals and wagons, entreating the children of Israel to leave because they thought, we will all die soon. Before their departure, the children of Israel asked their Egyptian neighbors for gold, silver, and clothing, for they remembered well Moshe's command. Moshe had informed them that Hashem had told him, please tell the people that each one should ask his Egyptian neighbor for gold, silver, and vessels. Thus the promise I gave their forefather Abraham that they would go out of Egypt with great riches will be fulfilled. Why did Hashem phrase this commandment to Moshe as a request, telling Moshe, please tell the people? The answer may be comprehended with the aid of the following parable. A man spent many years under terrible conditions in a Siberian labor camp. Finally, he was told, tomorrow you will go free. You will also receive a fortune upon leaving. Do you think I want money? The man replied. Let me just experience the moment when I will actually be liberated from this place, and I will make haste and leave happily without even a penny. Thus, Hashem was afraid that the children of Israel, once granted their freedom, would be in a hurry to flee and ignore the precept to ask the Egyptians for money. He therefore preceded it with a special request that this commandment be heeded. At first, the Egyptians attempted to deny possessing any valuables. However, the children of Israel described to them the exact location, shape, and amount of these possessions, since they had thoroughly combed the Egyptian houses during the days of darkness. The Egyptians then not only gave them the items they requested, but they gave 2 of each, saying, take double the amount, and just go. The children of Israel emptied Egypt of its wealth. They were lawfully entitled to all the money they received, because of the property they left behind, as well as for 210 years of unpaid slave labor. It was part of the punishment of the Egyptians that they were forced to give away their fortune to the children of Israel. Every single Jew who left Egypt took along 90 donkeys loaded with gold, silver, and pearls. While the children of Israel occupied themselves with the mitzvah of carrying away the wealth of Egypt, Moshe was engaged in a different mitzvah. He was preparing Yosef's coffin to bring it to burial in Eretz Yisrael, as Yosef's sons had promised to do. Moshe exerted himself for 3 days trying to locate Yosef's coffin, but his search was fruitless. Finally, he met Serach Bas Asher, an old woman who remembered the events at the time of Yosef's death. She led Moshe to a certain place by the Nile and, pointing at the river, revealed to him, Pharaoh's magicians placed Yosef's corpse in a metal coffin and sank it in the Nile. The reason Pharaoh's magicians had buried Yosef in the Nile was their wish to detain the Jews in Egypt forever. They told Pharaoh, "The Jews have promised Yosef to bury him in Eretz Yisrael. If his coffin will be concealed and they cannot retrieve it, they will never be able to leave." Moreover, the astrologers believed that the waters of the Nile would be blessed by the presence of Yosef's remains. Moshe, standing by the edge of the Nile, called, "Yosef, Yosef, the time has arrived for Hashem to fulfill his oath of redeeming the children of Yisrael, and the time has come to fulfill our oath to you. If you come up, we will take your coffin, but if not, we are absolved from our oath." Moshe hurled into the Nile a metal sheet on which the divine name had been engraved. Immediately, the coffin floated up. Moshe's ability to make a metal coffin rise to the surface of the river should not amaze us if we consider that this feat was accomplished even by a person inferior to Moshe, by the prophet Elisha, generations later. The students of the prophet Elisha went to the Jordan to cut beams, for the purpose of building for themselves a new Beis Hamidrash. The axe head of one of the students fell into the river. "Alas, master," he cried out to Elisha, "it is borrowed." Elisha asked him, "Where did it fall?" The student pointed to the place. Elisha cut off a stick, threw it into the Jordan, and the piece of iron floated up. The student stretched out his hand and retrieved it. This story is related in Tanakh to bring to our realization the greatness of the prophets. Elisha was able to reverse the laws of physics. At his decree, wood sank down into the water like stone and iron floated to the surface like wood. Moshe prepared Yosef's coffin for the journey, and also the remains of all the other sons of Yaakov, which were carried to Eretz Yisrael, each one by the Nasi of the tribe. Yosef's coffin was given the special honor of being transported through the wilderness side by side with the Aharon Ark, which contained the Lucho. When bypassers inquired, "Which ark is this that accompanies the Ark of the Shechinah?" they were answered, "During his lifetime, he who rests therein fulfilled all the commandments inscribed upon the Luchot of the Aharon." How do we derive from the Torah that Yosef observed all 10 commandments? He demonstrated the belief in "I am Hashem, your God," for he said to his brothers, "Am I in God's stead?" Bereshit 50:19. He had no other gods, for he stated, "I fear God." Bereshit 42:18. He did not pronounce Hashem's name in vain, for when he made a false oath, he swore by Pharaoh's life and not by Hashem. Bereshit 42:15. He observed Shabbat, commanding that the Shabbat meals be prepared in advance. Bereshit 43:16. He honored his father, complying with his wish to visit his brothers in Shechem, despite the peril it entailed for him. Bereshit 37:13. He fulfilled the prohibition against murder, refusing to obey the demand of Potiphar's wife to assassinate his master. He did not commit adultery with Potiphar's wife. He was wary of theft, not stealing any money from the fortune which he collected during the years of famine, but faithfully giving it to Pharaoh. He never revealed to his father that his brothers had sold him. If he refrained from relating a matter that was true because he considered its disclosure wrong, he certainly would not lie, transgressing the prohibition of giving false witness. He fulfilled the commandment, "You shall not covet," for he did not desire Potiphar's wife. Furthermore, we find in the Torah that Yosef did not transgress the prohibition of hating one's brother, Vayikra 19:17, nor the prohibition of taking revenge or bearing a grudge, Ebed 19:18. When he revealed himself to the brothers, he displayed no hatred towards them but spoke to them words of affection and comfort. After Yaakov's death, when the brothers suspected that he was taking revenge on them, he wept at being falsely suspected and explained to them that he bore no grudge and that he considered his sale to Egypt Hashem's doing. He also fulfilled the mitzvah of supporting one's impoverished brothers, Ibid under 25:35, by sustaining his family in Egypt. On the day of Yetzias Mitzrayim, Moshe also collected the cedar wood which Yaakov and his sons had planted in Egypt for the purpose of constructing a Mishkan. The number of Jewish men between 20 and 60 years old who left Egypt in broad daylight on this 15th of Nisan was 600,000 minus 1. Said Hashem, I will include myself in the number so that they shall be exactly 600,000. Children of Yisrael were joined by the Erev Rav, the best of the Egyptians. Although Hashem had counseled Moshe against accepting them as Gairim, Moshe insisted. He argued with Hashem, these people have witnessed your great strength in Egypt. If they accompany us, they will experience additional miracles and then fully comprehend that there is no power besides you. Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh, was among those who joined in the Exodus. She entered Eretz Yisrael, as did all the women of that generation, for only the men sinned in the wilderness and died there. And moreover, was one of the 9 righteous people who were taken to Gan Eden alive. Batya's reward was immense as a result of her immense self-sacrifice in saving Moshe's life, in opposition to her father's decree. She knew that his edict was motivated by profound hatred for children of Yisrael. When she saved Moshe and raised him, she risked her life. Once the time of their redemption had arrived, children of Yisrael were not detained in Egypt even one extra moment. They left in the greatest hurry. Urged on by the Egyptians, they had no time to prepare provisions for the journey, but carried with them only the unleavened dough, which they had intended to let rise and then bake. They later made matzos from this dough. A miracle happened wherein those matzos provided sufficient nourishment for 30 days, until the man began to fall on the 16th of Iyar. They wrapped up the remainders of their Pesach meal of matzah and maror, and placed them on their shoulders. For they cherished Hashem's mitzvah so much that they would not allow their donkeys to carry the leftovers. Although the children of Israel did not know how they would survive in the wilderness, all of them, men, women, and children, followed Moshe with the greatest emunah that Hashem would provide for them. Hashem in his kindness caused the Exodus to occur in Nisan, a month in which the weather is mild and pleasant and not in a rainy or cold season. The children of Israel reached their first destination, the town of Ramsey, within a very short time. From there, they were miraculously transported to the town of Sukkos as if on eagle's wings. Then they traveled on to Isam, which borders the desert. The significance of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus from Egypt, for our generation. Every generation has its disbelievers, atheists, skeptics, and scoffers, who deny the providence of an omniscient God and attempt to persuade us that there is neither reward nor punishment. The Almighty could easily disprove their claims by performing miracles which would demonstrate his existence and power. But should Hashem cause an upheaval of the cosmos, tampering with the laws of nature, for the fools and philosophers of every generation who doubt his existence? Instead, Hashem chose to demonstrate his providence and might once and for all, by sending the plagues upon Egypt and redeeming our forefathers. The events which took place before and during Yetzias Mitzrayim prove the following. Hashem communicates with great men and appoints them as his prophets, as may be seen from the fact that Hashem spoke to Moshe and informed him of the forthcoming plagues. He punishes the Rishaim, as is evident from the punishment of the Egyptians. He guides the affairs of the world, as is clear from the redemption of the enslaved Jews. All the above events were witnessed by our entire people. They were not only recorded in the Torah and transmitted by word of mouth from one generation to the next, but in addition, Hashem commanded us to fulfill a great number of mitzvos to ensure that Yetzias Mitzrayim and its miracles shall forever stay fresh in our minds. For this purpose, he commanded us to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim when reading the Shema, Devarim 16:3. He commanded that we write the portions dealing with Yetzias Mitzrayim on scrolls of parchment and place them in the tefillin. He bade us observe Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot in every generation in memory of Yetzias Mitzrayim, in addition to many more mitzvos. Consequently, a person who buys a mezuzah and affixes it to his doorpost has not merely purchased a scroll of parchment and nailed it to a beam, but he has thereby performed a mitzvah by which he acknowledges that Hashem is the creator. In the same vein, The Torah pronounces the stringent karais punishment upon someone who eats chametz on Pesach, since he thereby denies belief in Yetzias Mitzrayim, and, as a result, in all basic tenets of Torah. One who denies Yetzias Mitzrayim thereby denies Hashem and his Torah. One who acknowledges Yetzias Mitzrayim admits the truth of Hashem and his Torah. There is a special mitzvah in this Parsha to relate the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim on the night of the 15th of Nisan, at the time when the matzah, which must be eaten on that night, is placed before the person. Even if there are no other people present to whom he could relate the narrative of Yetzias Mitzrayim, he should recite the story of the Exodus to himself. The mitzvah to sanctify all male human firstborn, and also those of animals Hashem commanded Moshe. Every male firstborn is holy to Hashem. He belongs to the Kohen unless his parents redeem him by giving the Kohen 5 salam. The details of this mitzvah are explained in Parshas Korach, Bamidbar 1806. Sanctifying the firstborn reminds us that Hashem saved the Jewish firstborn in Egypt. The firstborn of a domesticated animal is also holy and must be given to a Kohen. Among the Tamai, unclean animals, it is only the firstborn of the donkey that has a special status. It must be redeemed with a lamb, or the value of this donkey, which is then given to the Kohen. If the firstborn of a donkey was not redeemed, its neck must be broken and no benefit may be derived from it. Why was the donkey singled out from all unclean animals? The firstborn of the Egyptians are likened to donkeys, Yechezkel 23:20. Thus this mitzvah will forever remind us of the plague of slaying the firstborn. A special law was given concerning donkeys, because they helped the children of Yisrael, who left Egypt by carrying their loads of gold and silver. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Midrash. Stories like these remind us that the lessons of the past still speak to us today. Hit that subscribe button to explore more stories that inspire, challenge, and connect us all. See you next time on the Midrash Says Out Loud.